So before we get the tire on, we should go ahead and get those old nasty brake pads off while we have everything nice and exposed. So it's good to have a plan. Let's see, are we the rear brakes? Man, that Mustang is annoying. It doesn't even sound good. It sounds like one long wet fart running down the road. Anyways, here's our rear pads, brand new set. And we're gonna get to disassembling some brakes real fast. Well, and then I'm gonna go ahead and slap in these swing arm caps because it just bothers me to have those holes open. Now, one thing that was on the Suzuki when I was doing all of the bearings and everything in it was it had a set of caps, but the things were so dry rotted. You'd think they were from the 70s. It was nuts. They came out in pieces. Come on, this is the right year model. How are you guys being so difficult? That's just so you don't get this bearing area and bolt area packed up with schmutz and nasty stuff. And while I'm here, might as well do it. Now, one thing that's got me a little concerned after having sent my suspension off and bringing it back is for the past, I've had this back on for about a week now. And it might just be leftover oil from working on it, but I'm starting to get a little nervous. Notice I have a little bit of oil coming off. From the head side of the shock on the front side, it's had a little weep ever since I've brought it back home. Now when we get this back together, I'm going to pump it up and down a few times and see if I still have a leak in my shock, and if I do, then I'm going to contact the mechanic and see what's going to go on with that. As working on shocks is not something I actually have the skill to do myself. Yeah, come on, feller. Tell you what, once you get these stupid caps in here, they're not going anywhere. I think it's any harder to get on there. I'd have to grab the tire irons for it. Now, one thing I'm going to do once I get the rear wheel and everything back on the chain, I'm going to spin this bike around. Everything that I've worked on, I'm going to look up the torque specs and get everything done. But this was the boring thing I was working on while I was on break. Just getting all the vent hoses and everything so it stops draining to the center of my cases whenever I have a float bowl issue. I trimmed those hoses off a smidge. Well, enough of the non sequitur portion of this. I have never worked on one of these brakes before. So a lot of dirt bike brakes, you'll actually just be able to pop the rear pads out. Before I really get started on that, I need to compress this cylinder. Normally, you would take the top of that off and compress it so you're not running the risk of pushing out your seals on the brake, piston itself, and having to do a rebuild on the caliper. I don't even think I need to say my famous statement of "ask me how I know." And you can do it at the bleeder, which is alright. The only problem is then you've got to go back through and bleed the system. You might still have to do it after this anyway. Oh wow. Huh. Well, that's not very much fluid in there. Probably have to go back there and bleed the system anyway. So you don't want that to go completely dry. And you want to fish out this foreign matter. Come on. Now, one reason you don't want to use old brake fluid is that it attracts water. So once you crack a new bottle open, You basically have like a week or two before a thing is starting to give you issues. Now I use .4 only in all of my bikes. It's required in the Africa Twin. On dirt bikes you can use 3 or 4. And the reason I like 4 is it has a much higher thermal threshold. It lasts a ton longer. So on and so forth. Ah, crap. Thought that would hold on there a little better. And you don't want to introduce air to the system because this is a real nightmare having to bleed it back out, especially with brakes that you're not entirely sure what the condition of everything is. So, once you get that portion done, grab your flat blade screwdriver, preferably a long handled one. I can make do with this. And you start pushing your pucks back in. Generally you'll just wedge them in between the brake. Oh goodness. This thing is properly seized in there. There's another way to do it, but I usually don't like to have to rely on that method. Goodness. You're one unhappy brake. See if we can bust out the huge screwdriver on it. If that doesn't work, then the other method I was talking about not being wild about is channel locking on the outside. Not a huge fan of using that method. I don't like anything that potentially mars up and makes the rest of my job harder, or having to waste money on expensive parts because I was too overzealous. Sometimes you gotta do it. You can use C-clamps too, which is what you'll do on an automotive brake caliper. You'll C-clamp it and then force it back out. So what we're gonna have to worry about here, I'm gonna go ahead and peel it out and I'm gonna C-clamp it like a like I'm doing a set of car brakes. Well, that's unexpected. It's not even time of year for fireworks. Let me grab a couple more tools and be right back. Now the other big thing about brake fluid is that it also strips paint off of stuff. I start thinking to myself, looking at that back tire, you don't really want to use it as a paint stripper because it is a little harsh on aluminum as well. Oh, goodness. It's been a while since these have been taken out, I'm guessing. Might have to, oh goodness. I might have to find my actual socket one, or socket deal on this. Now before I surrender to that, let me find my super long flat bladed screwdriver and see if I can just pry these things apart with a little bit of know-how, strength, and ingenuity. And I have a longer one. Oh. Yeah, that is the longest one I've got. Alrighty. Let's try and give it another pry. Whew! Normally that's fairly easy to make happen. So I'm getting the distinct impression that this thing is due for a rebuild. Huh, anti-chatter pad. Let's see if I can reuse that. All right. I'll take out the big guns. Guarantee you this will compact it. So this is exactly how you would do a set of brakes on your car. You don't want to do it to the cylinder itself, especially on a Ford product, because the pistons are not made out of metal, they're made out of plastic. Oh, look at that, it's just pressing on in there. Sometimes a somewhat effective way to bleed your brakes too, because it'll back pressure any air back out of it. Oh yeah. Alright, we'll feed it right back to where the metal touches, because any further past that you might run the risk of damaging your piston. I need to grease these guides up a bit too, man. This brake system's gonna need a little love. Now you notice I'm not using penetrating oil on this because, well, you don't want to really oil your brakes too much. Oh. Wow, okay. That was a heck of a brake on there. When you do this, you don't want to use enough force to have to use a breaker bar to take the damn thing apart. Holy crap. If I see red Loctite on here, I'm gonna go a little batty. Blue Loctite's fine on stuff like this. You don't want to have heat actuated Loctite on stuff that has hydraulic oil in it. I'm starting to think to myself, man, this is a little bit ambitious but rubbish for me to try and do all of this wheel, tire, chain, tear apart half a case and do everything else. This might be a weekend project. Honestly, normally when I do a tear down like this, it's like a process of like 4 weekends. I might say that I'm in a hurry, but honestly, the worst thing you can be when you're doing all this stuff is in a real huge hurry, because you start making dumb mistakes. Dumb and costly mistakes. And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, making the sorts of mistakes that require you to buy a bunch of new parts is never really a goal, a good goal for yourself. Let's save that chatter pad though, that's actually kind of nice. Huh. Goodness, these pins are seized up in there. So when they give you at the automotive shop, oh, you need any of that brake pin grease? You do it on your cars? Take extra bits of it. They hand it out for free generally, or for $1. Or you'll wind up like me right now, trying to figure out how you're gonna get this stupid pin out of here. Because it's seized up. Yeah, maybe I should have grabbed new pins for this too. I didn't realize I'd never had to replace the pins on these before. But it's the first time for everything. Ah, there we go. My goodness. Look at you used up heads. Now you can use regular grease for it. Oh, it used to have an anti-chatter backing to it. Oh, wow. I guess that's disintegrated. Now you can use regular grease for this, but it's a good idea to use... Oh, wow, yeah. So what you're going to look for on these, if you need to replace them, is if you see like a notch or a groove that keeps your brakes from freely moving in there. They're starting notch, so honestly I should go ahead and order a set, but that's going to have to be for next check, and I'm going to have to make do with what I've got. So we're going to grab Z-wire brush and a little bit of my liquid wrench. After doing this, make sure you wipe it off really well so you don't have liquid wrench dripping onto your brakes. I probably don't have to explain to you how counterproductive oiling your brakes is. When I used to race, I had a KX100 that had a real nasty habit of blowing fork seals every race. So the whole time I'd be racing, for like almost most of a season, I got tired of replacing the fork seal so much, I just ran half a season with no fork oil. Oh, when you ride enduro, I mean, it's not fun not to have fork oil, but you learn trail selection very well. Alrighty. Like, well, you just told us not to oil these. There's a method to my madness. Alright, we got some of the corrosion off of there. Unfortunately, I am actually out of that brake pin grease, so I'm going to use a little bit of my regular grease. But what do you do once you've freshly oiled these? Actually, normally what I would do, and I have it on the other side of the tank, is I use contact cleaner, electronic parts cleaner. It's good for removing fork oil off of stuff when you're working on it, but it also is like a light version of brake fluid, or brake cleaner. It's pretty effective. Yeah, definitely need to wash my hands before I go full with these new brakes, or I'll contaminate them. Be right back. Yeah, thinking to myself, when I buy another house, I'm gonna make sure I invest in a water softener. Our water here is chewable, but while I'm also investing in that water softener, I'm going to tap off, get a portable, or not portable, but a instant electric water heater. Give me a shop sink out in the garage. Not that I'm particularly bent out of shape about having to go inside and wash my hands, but it'd be more convenient if I just tootle on over and shop sink my hands off. It would also ruin less of my wife's items inside. So normally what you would use on this would be like a high temperature lithium grease for these pins. Oh! Happen to have a little bit of that, and it's bearing grease instead of the regular black stuff. Now when you're doing these, very, very, very small amount, wipe off any excess. You don't want it heating up and getting all over your brakes. Normally though, the grease you'll see is the white stuff that comes in the little envelope, the little lithium packs. That's the best stuff to use. This is a close second. Yeah. And just a little dab will do you. Not like changing a tire. You don't want to just lubricate this thing with reckless abandon. Alright. Got these pins going. Now normally your brakes will come with an anti-chatter device so it doesn't make a rattle or squeak while you're using them. These anti-chatter pads are nice, but they're not required. So if your new brakes don't have them, don't, you know, beat yourself to death trying to reuse them. Generally, you're not supposed to reuse them. Your higher end brake pads will actually have the anti-chatter pads. Come here, fella. Be careful when you're doing your brakes not to touch the actual pad material itself. Alright. As you notice in many things in life, especially when working on a bike, having a third arm is very helpful. Alrighty. Now, a lot of these brake pads that you have in bikes will actually just snap in. You have a little clamp that just snaps right in place. You just pop them out, pop them in. When you are on the front brakes is generally when you'll have pins to deal with. This one has a little too much goo on it, so I'm gonna... You don't want it pulled up on there because it will heat up and start dripping onto your brakes. Tell you what, these Yamaha bits are a little harder to put on than what I'm used to. I've been kind of spoiled. I'll say that's one aspect that Suzuki actually has Yamaha beat, is a lot of these parts are a lot quicker to swap on and swap off. Come on. There we go. Now I don't have the torque. I meant to print my manual out to find out what the exact torque specification was on all these bolts. So before I do anything engine-wise or suspension-wise or whatnot, I'll probably stop and write down the torque specifications and all that. Normally when it comes to brakes and stuff like this, good snug hand tight will do the trick. And there we go. So new brake pads. And before you slap the rear wheel back on, take your handy dandy screwdriver and pry the pads back apart, or you will never get your rear tire on. Look at all that meat on there. Now you don't want to pry the living crap out of your new pads, because you can crack them, and I have cracked a set. You wind up here sitting here doing your change, thinking that you're all Billy Badass. Man, I've got this stuff back together nice and quick. And then you crack your pad, and you see that bit of the pad just fall off, and you start to become crestfallen. Well, let's do one more tire check before I commit to putting this thing back on. Now normally these self-locking axle bolts are going to be 74 foot-pounds on bikes. We've lost half a pound, but it could be because it's getting colder out here. Yeah, I wanted to do my Four Seasons jacket video. It had been all cold and nasty for weeks. And finally, when I have everything together, it's been 70 degrees out here. And 50 to 70. And I don't really think that's a good cold weather test. Temperate weather test. Not quite as exciting. Alright, come on, Axel. My brand new bolt. Because the other one's self-locking mechanism was gone. And I'm surprised for a 98 generally you'll still have the cotter pin type of deals, but apparently Yamaha was ahead of its time a little bit. Alright. These are some nice spacers too. Spacer and dust cap. That's a little bit non-standard feeling as well. Oh, okay, yeah. Before we get too much further, let's go ahead and put our cap back on the reservoir. That thing looks a little bloated. See that? I'm guessing one of the previous owners crushed it, or I don't know. I don't think it seals completely. Call it a hunch. And call it more stuff I have to buy to replace on this bike. We'll see if it seals real fast. That actually has me a bit concerned. Has me befuddled. Unfortunately, I don't think I have a spare one of those brake reservoirs. But it does look like it's not in the best of shape. Oh, I got some fluid back in it. Yeah, that thing is warped beyond all get out. I've actually never seen that happen. Yeah, it does leak. Well, that's not good news. And I really don't have any more cash to throw at this bike for a little bit. Well, that puts a kerfluffle in this whole deal. Guess I'll see how much a new reservoir is. And a question to yourself, well, you know, if you do YouTube videos, why don't you use some of that YouTube money? I don't have enough viewers to even be sniffing at the idea of being monetized. It'd be nice to be able to bankroll my hobby on this, but that is a pipe dream. But I think to myself, as long as one person finds this disaster of me working on stuff even somewhat helpful, that puts me in a good mood. Doesn't put me in a good mood to find out I have to spend more money on fixing this bike up before it's safe to ride. That's a little disappointing. Such is life, though. Look at that, though. I would say the brakes are done, but oh my god. A guy like leave it too close to the campfire or something? I have never seen that happen. Not once. Not once. And I'm not about to cannibalize the one off of my Africa Twin. And my wife's bike uses drum brakes. Boy, that is a little bit disappointing. Sorry, I don't mean to sit here and rant. I'm just a little unhappy about that. Well, it's a good thing that I did the brakes. So I discovered this instead of discovering it on the trail. And then having the sort of nasty surprise you don't walk away from. Tell you what, that's the sort of nasty surprise you don't want. Oh, by the way, your brakes don't work. You're going down a trail in 4th or 5th gear. You've got a bank ahead of you. No. I'm just gonna cinch this up a smidge. You want to leave it loose while you're doing the chain. Which brings me to my next part. Yeah, no, that is certainly a shocking and depressing discovery. Alrighty. Well, enough of shock and depression. Let's get back to trying to get this thing together. I guess I'll be pricing that out. I'll probably hold off putting together the subframe till I get that replaced on there too. We might miss our ride, guys. So anywho, we got our sprocket, got our lock washer, and we have our nut. I'd say if you plan to dual sport the bike, you should probably change this every time. Just when you're on the highway, the thought of this thing just coming off, especially when I found it hand tight. Especially when I found it hand tight. I have a feeling there's something up with this bolt. Oh, that's the way it feeds on. Oh yeah, to make sure that you don't damage the spline. Ah, I get it. But yeah, pulling this thing off with my hand, that does concern me a bit. Older bikes, you'll just have a circlip there, like on the RM. I know I reference the RM a lot, but that's my last build. It's my point of reference. Alright, let's grab a chain. We're at least going to get this done today. Hopefully the front brakes and brake line and master cylinder too. Maybe even do some wiring. And maybe even a water pump. I can still do a large part of this bike, I just can't finish it. So I like the primary drive chains because I'm cheap. Alright, you're expecting me to say because they're the most awesomest chains in the universe? No, they're pretty good though. I've never had one fail on me. The only last chain I had fail on me actually was a DID chain. It was just a stainless steel. Alright, come on, fella. Like, man, you're doing this a really hard way. Sort of. Honestly, I like to feed it on bottom first because sometimes, if you're lucky, you can make a lot of the components of the bike do the work for you. Yeah, that is going to take a lot of moving this tire forward to get this master link on. Oh yeah. Nice new chain. Yep. Alright dude, that's enough of that spinning. You just take a break there. Now always make sure that you install your master link the way that the chain company tells you to. Get your lube on there, slap everything together. Now, on bikes that use these sort of high torque applications for their front sprocket washer, having everything chain wise in place is a requirement. No, no, fella. All right. Here in a little bit, it'll be time for another little breather on this. Also, when you start feeling a little mentally fatigued, it's a good idea to stop what you're doing, take stock of everything, clear your head a little bit, and take a deep breath. Just because you have a goal in mind doesn't mean it becomes easier when you kind of force yourself to keep moving forward sometimes when you're at a bit of a crossroads. Damn brake master cylinder. Anyways, but this sure is these tear perforations are not very terrible. Well, they're terrible. They're not able to be torn. There we go. Alrighty. So you take your little master link, and I'm not going to get into the debate of what's better, press links or clip links, rivet style, da 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 da. Honestly, my favorite style is what came on my bike, the SRX chain, where it's like a rivet style. It's like a screw rivet style where you take a 10mm wrench and you basically snap your rivets off. It's like a self-contained press rivet unit. And that was pretty inventive. Now, one thing you'll notice about me is I'm a sucker for like new ideas. If there's an idea that actually improves on a previous method, why not? I like companies that innovate. Just because you've done the same thing the same way for 20 plus years doesn't mean it's right. Doesn't mean there's not any way to improve it. Alright, so you get your grease on there, you get your O-rings on. Make sure you face your master link. Usually it'll be text side out. Oh goodness, yeah, I was a little off there. Now at this point, it'd be good to have a set of pliers around. These are snot nose. You press your master link into place because it won't always just press itself in. That side fed on nice and easy. This front side's being a little stubborn though. Heat. Now historically I've had a bit of trouble getting these stupid things on. Come on, dude. Yeah. Oh yeah, forgot to mention, always make sure that the way you feed this on, the clip side is not your drive side. You gotta put the curve side the way this spins. You gotta forgive me, I was a little bit rusty on doing these. Apparently I was clipping from the wrong side. So end to first pin. Pops on like a charm. And you just gotta make sure it's on all the way. So it should be flush with your link. And boom, you got a chain. Now I'm running a little shy on some battery real fast. So I'm going to need to let this thing charge and rig up a weight system. First I gotta see if my back brakes will hold any pressure. Alright, so they'll hold pressure. Rig up a weight system to keep the rear wheel locked and torque that down to the proper foot-pounds. And once that's torqued, hammer these tabs in place so it doesn't go anywhere. Then from there we adjust the chain, and generally at right about here you'll want 3 fingers of slack at the end of your chain guard. That's generally good slack. There'll be a specification like 1.5 inches or like 15 millimeters or anything else, but good rule of thumb, or rule of 3 fingers, is 3 fingers at the end of your chain guard. Get that all adjusted out the way it should be, then tighten it back up and we have a rolling rear wheel. And then at minimum we're getting this front brake done today. We're getting this done. I am determined that's going to happen, and hopefully we have enough time to drain the oil, coolant, swap hoses, and all sorts of other stuff, because these hoses are bulged in some areas and just not comfortable with it. Yeah, I was thinking about doing the leak down test. You've got to do that with full coolant and everything else, but honestly I'll just make do. We'll worry about the leak down test when we do the hot cams, auto decompression, and valve service. So I'm gonna give this a break and do some boring stuff for a bit. Alrighty, well, this has been a full day, about 4 hours on the bike. Managed to get the rear wheel and chain adjusted. I haven't got the front bolt on yet. I need to find that torque value. I'm going to hit the brake reservoir with a hot air gun, seeing if I can get it back to where it needs to be, or else I'll just buy a new one. Got the new brake master cylinder line, and then discovered I was missing the part that holds the brake line in place towards the bottom. But new pads front and back. Apparently I wasn't going to get as far as I thought I would get today, but that is such is life. We'll see what tomorrow holds.